people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the mother relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. This weekend, reigning IBF Super Flyweight champion of Argentina, Marcela Lujan, will be taking on seasoned challenger of Mexico, Irma Garcia. This will be Marcela Lujan's first fight of this year. She saw action 2 times last year.
Those were journeywomen level opponents she fought last year, whereas Irma is a cut above those girls.
Irma Garcia, who sports a professional record of 21 wins, 4 losses with 1 draw.
4 knockouts.
Definitely an argument there that Irma Garcia is a more experienced fighter, a more experienced professional than the reigning champion Marcela Lujan.
A veteran of 26 professional bouts to Marcela Lujan's 12.
Having shared the ring with the likes of Jessica Gonzalez, Daniela Bermudez, Bobby Juarez.
Even though it didn't always go her way, you can say that Irma Garcia's quality of competition really is a lot better than Marcela's is.
So Marcela Lujan is not without her virtues. She has shared the ring with at least one capable fighter, a former champion in Jorgelina Guanini, who she fought to a majority draw.
Also fought a former champion in Deborah Dionysius.
Marcela Lujan, the reigning defending champion, is approximately 18 years younger than Irma Garcia. The discrepancy in the fighters' ages
Noticeable.
Marcela Lujan, the champion, the orthodox fighter, Irma Garcia, the challenger, the southpaw. You get the sense that Marcela Lujan may have to work a little harder for this victory than the 2 victories she racked up last year against those journeywomen level opponents.
And as stated, Marcela fought 2 times last year.
This will be Marcela Lujan's first fight of this year. Comes to Irma. Irma saw action late last year in November. That was her only fight last year. And she saw action more recently this year in March.
She ain't got no ring rust to have to shake off. She's sharp.
About as sharp as she can be at 41 years old. The reigning champion Marcela Lujan will have home field advantage. This is set to go down in her native Argentina.
Marcela Lujan is a capable fighter and a defensively responsible champion.
She can make herself a hard target, hard to hit, staying on the move.
Working off the counter, she is a bit of a counter puncher.
Marcela Lujan's base style doesn't really jump out at the screen at you per se. She doesn't have eye-catching power or blistering hand speed,
Athleticism or flashy footwork, though she is a capable fighter.
Don't forget that she's shared the ring with an offensive whirlwind in Jorgelina Guanini, and they fought to a draw.
Like I said, you have to compete at a certain level to share the ring with Jorgelina Guanini.
Marcela Lujan did, and she's going to be returning to action this weekend. I think that in spite of all of Irma Garcia's experiences, Marcela Lujan, 18 years younger than Irma, she still is the safe bet, the safe choice in her native Argentina, where she will have home field advantage in the event of any close rounds. Those rounds are likely going to go to Marcela.
Marcela, who's one of 4 champions, 4 reigning champions at this weight.
You have Marcela's countrywoman, Clara Lescurat of Argentina, holding the WBA title, Lourdes Juarez of Mexico, holding the WBC, and Japan's own Tamao Ozawa, holding the WBO.
There's a lot of activity going on at Super Flyweight.
You have this weekend's fight between Marcela Lujan and Irma Garcia for Marcela's IBF title. You also have the upcoming rematch between reigning WBC interim champion Sonia Osorio and Adelaida Ruiz. That's set to go down in a few weeks' time. The winner of the fight becomes the mandatory challenger for Lourdes Juarez's green belt.
Things are shaking, rattling, and rolling at 115 pounds.
And when it comes to this weekend's fight, I don't anticipate that the blue belt will change hands. I anticipate that at minimum, Marcela Lujan can win a points decision against the challenger, Irma Garcia. Keep your eyes peeled for that. Men's super middleweight news, David Benavidez is willing to move up to 175 pounds for Benavidez, Bivol, and Ramirez fights.
No, he's not. He's going to wait around for Canelo.
And we all know it, though. According to this story, David Benavidez is ready for his major breakthrough, but marquee matchups still seem to escape him. To land the career-defining fights that he desires, the 168-pound knockout artist is willing to move up to 175 pounds to take on the light heavyweight champions and top contenders. Father and trainer Jose Benavidez Sr. told BoxingScene.com in an interview, David is an animal. He trains super hard. He's focused and disciplined. We want to stay active and keep advancing. We'll fight anybody in order to make our history. We're always in the gym and staying ready.
The guys they mentioned ain't PBC fighters, so unless David's going to cross the street, this is a non-starter.
Now, if David already had a couple of losses and he was getting up there in age, maybe the PBC would let him cross the street the same way they let Marcus Brown cross the street through an Artur Better Beef fight.
But that's not where he is right now. He's one of their younger guys at 168 pounds.
25 years old, unbeaten, a two-time former WBC super middleweight champion. I don't think for a second the PBC's going to let him go anywhere.
It's monotonous and repetitive, I know, but what do you want me to say?
If the Artur Better Beef fight is presented to us, we'll definitely take it. We are open to testing the waters at 175 pounds. I would also love a fight with Dimitri Bivol. They've sparred before. Gilberto Ramirez is another fight we want. We're ready. If no one wants to fight at 168, we're going to have to move and bounce back up and down. We are ready to test our skills and give the fans the fights they want. The 25-year-old Benavidez is a former two-time super middleweight champion who has lost his titles outside of the ring due to substance abuse and missing weight.
David was last in action earlier this year against former IBF middleweight champion David Lemieux.
And that fight worked out exactly as I expected it to work out, exactly as I predicted. David Lemieux has since retired from the sport of boxing. He retired last week.
Best wishes to him.
When it comes to this David Benavidez, they might be talking about a venture north of 168 pounds. Talking about guys like Gilberto and Dimitri and Artur, but I'm not expecting any of that to happen while David Benavidez is in a pole position by way of the WBC to challenge Canelo Alvarez. I'm not expecting that he's going to move up.
Fighters that fight on ESPN and DAZN.
For what? For top-ranked fighters? Matchroom fighters? Golden Boy Promotions fighters?
Come on.
Not fucking going anywhere. He's going to stay right there. People don't want to fight him. The Charlos don't want to fight him. Caleb Plant doesn't want to fight him. David Morrell doesn't want to fight him. Demetrius Andrade doesn't want to fight him. At the end of the day, we can't force these guys to fight David. Benavidez Sr. said he had a handshake agreement with David Morrell's team to fight the upstart Cuban prospect later this year, but the deal ultimately fell through.
That's not a good look for David Morrell because he spent quite a bit of time calling out David Benavidez.
And that's unfortunate because that would have been a nice battle of the unbeatens in the fall if they could have gotten it over the line. There is still time to see if they can't change David Morrell's mind, though in truth, David was likely calling out David Benavidez because he figured he'd get a nice wad of cash for the fight, not realizing you don't get life-altering money to fight David Benavidez.
I don't know, maybe David Morrell wants that fight, but his handlers might not want it for him because it's high risk, low reward.
You don't get a lot of money for fighting David Benavidez. You don't even get a belt. The most he can aspire to gain fighting David Benavidez is a WBC Mando spot, but when you think about it, David Morrell already has that by way of the WBA.
Seems his handlers doubled back on that fight. They might have wanted it at one point, but they don't seem to want it anymore.
So David's left without a dance partner for the fall. He has a lot of skills that people haven't seen yet. People say he can't box. Well, he hasn't had the need to box. He's been stronger than his opponents. With Better Beef, you have to move around. You can't just come forward. That guy hits hard. He's super smart and very intelligent. For somebody like that, we have to be super careful. We would have to box and use the jab and head movement and use some angles. People want to see fights that are really dangerous. One loss doesn't mean anything in our minds. He's a warrior and willing to risk his unbeaten record.
Sounds good.
Promotion by way of name association. You name drop that many guys. These are all guys that have got stuff going on, you understand. Artur Better Beef, he's supposed to be in action later on this year against Anthony Yard. He's coming off a highlight reel knockout win over Joe Smith Jr. Dimitri's supposed to be taking on Zerto in the near future. It's David Benavidez that's up the creek without a paddle. It's David Benavidez that doesn't have a dance partner, though I don't know why, since the PBC has several prized stallions in the super middleweight division in that 168-pound show. The problem is they all want to be coddled.
Every single one of them.
You could argue that it would be less than ideal for Caleb Plant, coming off that knockout loss to Canelo Alvarez late last year, to go straight in with David Benavidez. It's just not realistic. But what about that David Morrell fight? What about Jermall Charlo, who was supposed to be in action earlier this year in the middleweight division against Maciej Suliecki, but he suffered a back injury?
Yeah, I don't actually think he injured his back. I think they just scrapped that idea because it's a fight nobody gives a shit about.
Jermall Charlo fights in a lot of fights that nobody gives a shit about, but a fight with David Benavidez, that would be a high-profile fight, perhaps high-profile enough that maybe they put it on pay-per-view.
They might have to satisfy both teams' financial demands.
It's kind of obvious to a lot of people that Jermall Charlo isn't crazy about moving up to super middleweight for David Benavidez. So in order to make that happen, you might have to offer that guy a big wad of cash. And things being the way they are right now, perhaps the only way to get it to him is by way of a pay-per-view. You give him a nominal guarantee, maybe $2, maybe even $3 million for the fight, and let him make the rest of his money from the upside.
What's keeping Jermall Charlo at middleweight anyway?
No signature fights. There's no big fights there for him. This is one fight of some value that he can have.
Problem is, you're going to have a hell of a hard time getting those guys to do anything.
Really are. The Morrell people likely realize, why take on David Benavidez and run risks with that guy when we can catch Caleb Plant on the rebounder, an aging fighter, a former champion, and Anthony Durrell. More winnable fights for us than David Benavidez for comparable money. That's likely what they're telling themselves. There was a time when Caleb was calling out for a David Benavidez fight, but that's when they were both champions. That was over 2 years ago.
Over 2 years later, neither of them are champions. Neither of them have belts.
What's in it for them now? You got a couple of outliers floating around. Former Matchroom alum Anthony Sims, who suffered his first professional defeat to Romer Angulo over a year ago. He has since gotten himself back in the winner's bracket. Maybe they can have David fight that guy, or maybe they can have David fight Lerone Richards, who very recently left Matchroom. Lerone Richards, a UK-based fighter, a pure boxer, an unbeaten one.
You got Carlos Gangara, who was outpointed by Lerone Richards.
I think he was in action not that long ago, having since gotten himself back in the winner's bracket. Certainly a less expensive option than trying to get Jermall Charlo in the ring with David.
Benavidez versus Gangara is an all-action fight. Less expensive option than trying to get Charlo to move up.
I'm just bouncing ideas around, because what I don't expect to see is David Benavidez move up in weight for Artur, Dimitri, or Gilberto.
Won't happen.
And finally, in men's super flyweight news, Chocolatito Roman Gonzalez is open to facing Nonito Donaire, but says his main priority is the Estrada trilogy. Juan Francisco Estrada, who very recently vacated his WBA title.
He was ordered to fight his mandatory challenger, Joshua Franco.
And he chucked the belt instead, prioritizing a tune-up fight en route to a Chocolatito showdown later on this year. In a recent interview, another multi-division champion, Nonito Donaire, expressed his desire to drop down in weight for a clash with Gonzalez. Chocolatito is open to making that fight, but his top priority is the trilogy with Estrada. Anything can happen, said Gonzalez to Izquierdazo about a fight with Donaire. As long as they pay me well, he is one of those really good fighters. But the fight with Gallo Estrada is the one that people really want to watch, and the one they are asking for. Gonzalez said that he is willing to fight any champion or emerging star in his weight class, such as Joshua Franco, IBF champion, newly crowned IBF champion Fernando Martinez, or reigning WBO champion of Japan, Kazuto Ioka.
Well, he's not going to get Fernando Martinez because Fernando's supposed to be having a rematch with Jerwan Cajas very soon.
Fernando could talk that shit, but at the end of the day, he's over there on PBC Island. Nobody's going to get a crack at that IBF title unless they are over there with him.
And I'd love to be wrong about that, but I don't think I will be.
Chocolatito mentioned Joshua Franco, newly crowned WBA super flyweight champion Joshua Franco, who was elevated to that position very recently when Gallo Estrada vacated his WBA title. It just so happens that Joshua Franco is Bam Rodriguez's brother.
Bam Rodriguez, who's taken the world by storm, an emerging star in the super flyweight division, holding the WBC title.
Chocolatito doesn't want to fight Bam. He said they're like family, those two guys, and he's the one guy that he wouldn't fight, though he does seem open to fighting Bam's brother. Where he doesn't want to fight Bam because they're like family, Joshua Franco and Bam actually are family.
That's interesting.
Kazuto Ioka makes the most sense, in my humble opinion, Kazuto Ioka is in many ways the fifth Beatle at super flyweight. At super flyweight, you had the four kings: Carlos Cuadras, Sor Rungvisai, Gallo Estrada, and Roman Gonzalez. But Kazuto Ioka is just as, if not more accomplished, as some of those guys, but for some reason, he's been out of the loop, left out of the party, and I think now, right here and now, that fight makes the most sense for the winner of Roman Gonzalez versus Juan Francisco Estrada 3.
Makes a hell of a lot more sense than fighting Nonito Donaire.
They have their own plans, but we are willing to fight anyone and see what happens, Gonzalez said. However, the only opponent that Roman does not want to face is Jesse Bam Rodriguez. The two boxers are good friends and share the same promoter in Taken Promotions of Japan. We can't fight because we're both with Taken Promotions, Gonzalez pointed out. We are a family, and the one in charge is Mr. Akihiko Honda, and he is asking me for the fight against Gallo Estrada.
Like I said, he's not willing to fight Bam, but he is willing to fight Bam's brother, because Bam's brother, he's got WBA titles.
He doesn't sound averse to facing Nonito Donaire. Nonito Donaire, who very recently announced that he'd like to move down in weight and take on either Chocolatito or Juan Francisco Estrada, though in truth, the both of those guys, they have options that don't require them to take on Nonito Donaire, the aging former champion who's coming off a second-round knockout loss to Naoya Inoue in their rematch up there at bantamweight.
Did you hear what Roman said? He's open to anything so long as they pay him.
Nonito Donaire is a pro bellum fighter, you understand. So if he's pursuing either Roman Gonzalez or Juan Francisco Estrada, any of those matchroom fighters down there at super flyweight, it's because he's hoping to get a payday from those fighters. He can't deliver one to them.
You see what I mean? At this stage in Chocolatito's career, he wants the big fights, the big prices, the big paydays.
And there are a couple of payday possibilities right there. Perhaps a fight with Joshua Franco for the WBA title. Certainly that trilogy with Juan Francisco Estrada, everybody's waiting for. He doesn't actually need Nonito Donaire, so while he's not averse to facing him, we have to face reality.
There's a party going on at super flyweight that Nonito isn't invited to.
Got nothing against the guy. I fucking love him. He's one of the best. But that's the truth. That's reality. At 38 years old, being a pro bellum promotions fighter, what incentive is there for Chocolatito or any one of those high-profile super flyweights? What incentive is there for them to take him on when they can take on each other and make more money?
There's no room for Donaire at super flyweight. That's the truth.
Just as a boxing fan, a fight between the winner of Estrada versus Gonzalez 3 and Kazuto Ioka, reigning WBO 4-division champion. He's a 4-division champion the same way that Chocolatito is a 4-division champion. I like that fight a lot better than a potential Donaire fight.
Feels like a fight that should have happened a long time ago, but it didn't, though there's still a chance that it might.
So long as that window of opportunity is open, these very accomplished super flyweights, these multi-weight champions, Chocolatito and Kazuto in particular, both 4-division champions, I'd rather see them lock horns with each other than see either one of them take on Nonito Donaire coming off a knockout loss, attempting to make a weight he hasn't made in close to a decade, or a little over a decade.
My honest opinion is Nonito should retire.
No room for him at super flyweight. He's done all he can do at bantamweight. He's too old to go up there to super bantamweight and try his luck, try his chances. He'll probably get hurt.
Stephen Fulton's up there, MJ Akhmadaliev is up there.
I don't like his chances against either of those unified champions, either of those fighters. But if he wants, he can go to the PBC and see if they can't set him up. Stephen Fulton fight, go to Matchroom, see if they can't set him up. MJ Akhmadaliev.
Yeah, if he wants to.